Right, hello everyone, and welcome to game number 1 in our best of 3 series between Pbhead and Gameslayer. This is going to be one of our semifinal matches for the 7th Offworld tournament, and once again, it looks like we've got kind of an okay map going on, as long as the game doesn't freeze up on me too badly. There we go. Not a lot of silicon. That is the single biggest thing that I've noticed about this map, is not a lot of silicon. Pbhead has decided that it looks like that initial scientific location with the obvious iron and water is what he wanted access to first. 6 water tiles is a pretty good amount, even without perfect adjacency. That's going to be pretty solid. And of course, all that iron is fantastic for steel with aluminum nearby to allow for some pretty easy aluminum collection. Gameslayer is in a bit more of an awkward circumstance. He does not have a steel triangle going on, which isn't really ideal, not what he would have been going for. On top of that, if he wasn't going to take a triangle, probably would have been better to... well, this is alright. This can work. It's okay. Still a little bit awkward not to have a triangle for Gameslayer, though. Gameslayer does have all of the aluminum purchase that he needs. Unfortunately, that is now $50. $50 on that aluminum. Not really super fantastic. Pbhead, I would imagine, should be taking some aluminum for himself. He has no interest in that whatsoever immediately, though. Instead, just going after the strong silicon. What he is going to need to do because of this, quite likely, is sell down what he currently has. Make sure to get a new claim ready to go for aluminum, and that's not exactly what he did. Instead, he canceled one of his claims, moved into the aluminum. Both players kind of using the ability to cancel claims to try and force awkward situations out of their opponents. They're not necessarily completely forcing them. There we are, Pbhead adjusting his aluminum claim. But you can see both players just kind of using this claim system to slow each other down. Pbhead only just now establishing a metal mine. It will be on a high aluminum tile, but that $55 aluminum, $55 for that aluminum, and Pbhead has not managed to collect a single piece yet. Instead, what he has managed to do is buy up some, but that just brings the price higher in case Gameslayer wants to sell some down, use it for the black market, all kinds of simple little things. Speaking of the black market, it does look like Pbhead was a little bit frozen on his aluminum tiles. Not a super long freeze. It is scientific against scientific here, so that's never going to have a ridiculously large impact, but it is still relevant in allowing Gameslayer kind of better access to that aluminum potentially in the long term. Gameslayer has also gone ahead and moved into a pair of glass furnaces this game. It is worth noting the fact that the colony, with this ridiculous just map-wide silicon shortage, the colony did of course decide that it needed to consume a lot of glass this game. Why wouldn't it, right? So -1 glass consumption coming from the colony this time is going to make things even more awkward for our players. You can feel that it's taking a long time to push up to HQ level 3 here. Gameslayer is going to be the first one to do it. Now I'm very concerned about Pbhead because he is already in C levels of debt. Now he is a scientist, so maybe not having access to goon squads isn't so painful. He is against a scientist, so maybe not having access to that aggressive portion of the black market, not as painful, but it is that potential is still something he's going to need to be aware of moving forward this game. And of course, he can't afford to let his debt fall too far, as it would just make him far too easy of an acquisition for Gameslayer. Should also be pointed out that Gameslayer has nice, easy geotherm access this game, which will definitely be helpful. There are magnetic storms to knock out the food from these farms, potentially, but no pirates to steal it. So it could still be an okay decision, just awkward to have to use water far away from your base and make sure to have to send things very carefully to make sure magnetic storms don't cause too many problems for you this game. New claim auction is a pretty big deal. Pbhead cannot afford to spend a whole lot of debt on this, as we've touched on earlier, already in that C bond rating. That's 20% interest rate on his debt. Huge amount. Pbhead's still pushing pretty high, though. He wants this, and Gameslayer, he's nervous about taking it. He doesn't want a $14,000 claim, it looked like. So instead, he's just going to let Pbhead have his extra debt, already knocked himself down into that D level of debt, in fact, Aluminum has crashed out by now, both players in a rather large amount of it. They've killed that market. It's dead and gone. So Pbhead, with this freeze onto his food, the only real money he's making is off of this silicon. Oh, Pbhead, are you going to go for what is this? Is this a glass furnace flying through the air? I do believe it is. I'm a little bit nervous about that because of the existence of magnetic storms this game. We already talked about Gameslayer having to be very, very careful with his farms to make sure that he was magnetic storm resistant this game. Pbhead's going to be in the same boat now. He's just setting himself up for just as much, if not more, of a weakness. Far more glass is willing to fly through the air at once than food. And you can already see that, like a magnetic storm right here, that would be extremely painful. Here's the thing, Pbhead can't buy a magnetic storm right now. So does Gameslayer have to care? No, not at all. Doesn't have to worry about anything. The problem for Gameslayer is now simply in that transportation time. He has to get the food back to his colony. That takes a while. That sucks. That said, his primary weakness of the ability to knock his food out of the sky doesn't exist anymore. It's absolutely fantastic for him. D level of debt for Pbhead already. I feel like this found was just a bit too early. It felt like it came down very, very quickly this game. And yes, it was a valuable location. But was it valuable enough? Look at this. Dynamite already being used against this glass furnace. It's going to be offline for an extended period of time. That's not what you're after at all. Power up at 254, and Pbhead's just sitting here like, I'm still on HQ level 3. I can't. Right? He does have 600 aluminum. These could be transitioned into solar panels. Could be. They aren't being. Certainly a little bit awkward there. Now, I do also want to point out that it does look like we are starting with more shares for each player than we were yesterday. A patch did come out this time. I'm going to have to make sure of that after this, but I do believe we're starting with 2 shares. I don't think both players bought a share at this point. And I am confident that they used to start on 1 in the 1v1 situation. Cold Fusion coming out already. And what do we got? 10,000 is what Pbhead is going to pay for that. I am actually really, really surprised that Gameslayer did not push that. Now, Gameslayer might just be in a situation where he's like, alright, I'll just want to kill you anyway. Or maybe he thinks Pbhead's already in so much debt, it doesn't matter. But here's the thing. Pbhead's now accumulating debt at a far reduced rate. Only having to pay $6 for water right now? That is not a lot. That is really not a lot. That said, Gameslayer was just like, well, look, the game's over. And when the game's over, auctions aren't important anymore. Fancy that. So, a few odd things. It's true, Pbhead does frequently lose game 1 and then go on to take the other 2. That was just a weird one, right? That was a weird one. Pbhead in massive amounts of debt, truly ridiculous. Founding super early. Couldn't quite get into great resources that game for a long time. Like, stuck on HQ level 2 for a long time. Both players were. Stuck on HQ level 3 for forever was Pbhead. And then finally, when he makes the commitment to upgrade, he just instantly dies because Gameslayer knows he can't defend himself. Whereas Gameslayer just kind of playing, honestly, for the most part, a relatively straightforward game in an awkward found. But with that advantage of getting into glass super quickly, that was very, very helpful for him. And here's the thing. I don't know if Pbhead actually made anything off glass that game. We can actually check. Get me to the charts and graphs. Come on. I'm actually really curious about this. Go to the resources. Glass. Pbhead purchased $28,000 of glass and sold 9,000. So he maybe got like 1 glass shipment in that he managed to sell down. Maybe. That could have also just been from maneuvering it around a bit. Look, he didn't make anything. He didn't make anything on glass. He actually purchased more silicon than he sold that game, despite owning more silicon tiles than Gameslayer. Whereas Gameslayer, we going over to him, and it's like $51,000 made off of glass. Only had to buy 11,000 silicon for that one little that one little glass furnace, and of course getting both of them established is what forced him to purchase that silicon. So Gameslayer, just a straightforward game, like very, very early on, said, all right, colony's just going to consume glass, I'll just make glass. And then he won the game off of it. It was actually that simple for the most part. Eventually moved into the life support resources still. Certainly a good move. Had the advantage that he couldn't be magnetic stormed out and just won super easily. So that's enough looking at this game. Let's get on to another in game number 2.